A very good evening, everyone. It's such a pleasure to bring to you this masterclass on Future Forward, Scripting Employee Experience Success Stories by SHRM in collaboration with Advantage Club. I'm Nitya Vijaykumar from Knowledge and Advisory Services at SHRM and your host for the day. Audience, please note that this session is coming to you as a webcast and hence we have disabled the audio and video. However, this should not deter you from asking your questions through chat. And as your host, I will get as many answered by the panel for you as possible. The world of work continues to change at a rapid pace, especially in the wake of the recent disruptions at the workplace, which have radically altered every aspect of work, right from the work environment to the channels of communication to interact with our colleagues. The need for HR and business departments to collaborate to make organizations resilient is at an all-time high. The challenge, however, is how should organizations go about shaping the workplace into something better while retaining aspects of its identity that are worth sustaining? Research shows that a good employee experience leads to higher employee engagement and thereby employee productivity. Employees are more devoted to work and the company, and it results in better business outcomes and an improved sense of individual well-being. First off, let's start off by being very clear about what employee experience means. It's a nebulous term, and that's very hard to pin down. Essentially, employee experience refers to everything an employee experiences at work, their interactions with their boss, software, their teams, and hundreds of other things. It's a holistic term that considers the full spectrum of an employee's experience through their entire time at a company. It's a pleasure to welcome to this masterclass Ms. Shalini McAdam, Vice President, People Practices, India and APAC at Mindtree. Shalini has spent over 2 decades in the IT/ITS space and has seen possibly one of the kind of transitions in the corporate history. She's worked with business and functional teams to drive initiatives of change, standardization, and process excellence globally. She's also led international HR teams and worked closely with cross-functional teams to design and execute people frameworks that complemented cultural and regional nuances and complied with regulatory frameworks as well. A very warm welcome to you, Shalini.
Hi, everyone.
Joining Shalini is Smriti Bhattiora, co-founder and chief operating officer at Advantage Club. After a successful corporate stint, Smriti decided to board the entrepreneurial bandwagon in 2014. To her credit is the transformation of the Advantage Club from a small startup to a multi-million-dollar venture. She's most excited to talk about anything HR, business, sales, tech, startups, or if you simply want to enjoy some Harry Potter trivia, you know whom to reach out to. It's such a pleasure to have you join us today, Smriti.
Thank you, Nitya. Really glad to be here.
Lovely. On that note, Charlie, you have spent so many years in the people function and have seen businesses grow globally. While we used to keep talking about customer experience as the mainstay of business until a few years ago, the focus has now clearly moved to employee experience as well. Would love to invite you to this master session as you address our audience on your keynote about how your experience and thoughts have shaped and you think will lead the way forward on scripting employee experience.
Thank you so much, Nitya. Great to be here. I think all of us are on the learning curve of this whole journey of employee experience, and the pandemic really shifted a lot for us because we were trying to navigate what the pandemic meant in terms of a business model itself, in terms of impacting the business model. So great topic, a lot of thoughts, and I don't know if I have any specific, direction to give, but I'm happy to share some, some experiences that we've had and some thought processes where perhaps those on the call can look at, crafting their own success stories in their organization, right? So maybe I'll start with, and many of you have heard of possibly the business S curves, right? You start, you have a peak, or you start slow, you have a peak of activity, and then you kind of plateau in terms of what you want to do. And the thing is, when you look at HR initiatives, right, our cycles are not very different. It's not that we are discussing employee experience today, right? There was a problem 20 years ago. You have a challenge, you invest in that solutioning. There is an ideation, then there's execution, you pick up speed, everybody now understands what you need to do. And then suddenly, there's a plateau in terms of, and the environment has changed. And then the next S curve starts, right? So I don't think employee experience has been any different. And it has in its own way gone through this S curve. But now with the pandemic, the focus has shifted from initially it was transaction, now it's about experience. And now it's complicated because there's a hybrid working model, right? And so I think many of us, including us as leaders, we are actually going back to the drawing board to say, how do you create a new story that's actually there for people to stay? Sorry, is my light okay? And as we talk about this topic, I was thinking through who we, of course, we refer to customer experience. We also refer, so we try to look at the industry and see where is experience actually wow. And my lens shifted to the hospitality sector, because it's actually, it's a huge leap to take from their book in terms of how do you actually manage employee experience. And I want to call out a few points that I have observed or noticed. Now, when you think of a hotel, or if you think of an airline, right, there is a brand associated, and often the brand is about the experience. Fly with us and you will have this experience, or dine with us, stay with us, and you have this, experience, right? So the thing is, what are they calling experience, right? The way they make you feel. Now let's look at the hotel industry, right? The way they make you feel, the way they've personalized your journey, the attention to detail that they have taken to make you feel, wow, I didn't expect that, right? The added things they threw in. And somewhere, despite the volume and the load that the brand would deal with, they have found a way to personalize experience and make each of us feel like a chief guest. How they've done it is really a fantastic case study to go through, right? And there's a doggedness to get that experience right. The entire ecosystem would channelize its energy to making sure that your or my experience is out of this world. And that ethos ends up getting, carried through the entire cycle, right from the time you're making the booking to the time you pay that final check, right, and leave them. But there's an important aspect to keep in mind when you look at the hospitality sector. It's not just about the good, what attention to detail they paid, or how they personalized your experience. But what's also important is the ethos they carry. Once you have been defined as a guest in the hotel, then you are really royalty. And whatever you say or whatever you do, there is a strong focus to make that experience right. So I'll give you some examples, right? I could be idiotic, I could be unreasonable, I could be rude, I could be demanding, I could be difficult, right? But if I'm a guest, the hotel staff, they're very clear, the ethos is very clear. Go out of your way, make a difference, and create a positive experience, right? So irrespective of the tantrums that I carry, irrespective of what I throw, my negative experience gets converted into a positive, or my negative intent gets converted into a positive experience. And there's a lot of learning in this, because how do you then take this experience creation that has happened, and how do you actually bring it into our industry? So maybe I'll just summarize a few critical thoughts from what I just shared. Firstly, the entire organization is committed to creating the right experience. It's not one staff, it's not the CEO, it's not the CPO, and it's not just HR. Every individual and function will channelize their energy towards the right employee experience. So, it's not a unit ethos, it's not a person's ethos, it's the organization ethos. So that's the first thought I want to leave with you, that when you talk about employee experience? Is it an organization ethos? The second is that every person, you could call them staff or a person in the organization, knows what they need to deliver, right? They are trained with this ethos in mind. So there is a strong SOP, and that, and there's a review mechanism around that SOP, and this makes it a breeze, right? So when you have somebody complain about food, right, how do you deal with it? What do you tell the person? The people around or serving or servicing that have been trained on how to handle it, right? So every person, the second point I want to leave with all of you is that every person knows the experience that they need to deliver and have a SOP for this, right? The third thing that I want to leave with you in this experience is that the precise points where that value is created or destroyed, both, right, is called out. So everybody knows what to expect. Now, there is a point of value creation, which is, which room do I go to, right? A guest might have a Vastu Vishuja room. They will want some flexibility to check in. These points that create value or destroy value and perception are debated, they are discussed, and there are clear, guidelines that everybody has in terms of how do you do transaction point management, right? And the last one is that irrespective of an entire ethos, irrespective of SOPs, irrespective of training, there is constant innovation and debriefing. So it's not about having created that plan and then just running it and leaving to see how it runs. It's just because you made the plan, it's not left there, right? Every day, the team will make small adjustments or they will do innovation to improve their experience. And therefore, there are also feedback mechanisms to ensure that that experience is in real time. So some huge learnings, right? When you take this to our own industry, right? Is everybody in the organization, committed to employee experience, right? Or is it just a HR team doing this, right? Second is, do we have SOPs that help us navigate how to manage employee experience? The third is, have we identified what are those moments of truth or value points, which again, I want to call out, where experience is created or destroyed, and have we understood how to tactfully manage them and convert that into the positive experience? And of course, are we constantly looking at our journey, doing harakiri to our own plans to say that, hey, this works or doesn't work for us? So I think that's the first thought from my first point I wanted to leave with you. Maybe now is a good time to talk about the IT industry and what employee experience is here. So I think we'll start with the same question, right? If you ask any CPO today, they will tell you, I'm committed to employee experience. But the question is, are they really, right? How much are they willing to go out of their way to create that experience, right? And I think the first part in the entire journey of employee experience is really scripting that success story, right? How committed are you to that employee experience? Because if you don't have the ethos, right, the rest of the journey isn't going to take shape, right? And I'll talk about a maturity model here when we talk about experience, right? So how many CPOs will come back and say, hey, listen, this is core to me. It's not a secondary, tertiary value. It is core, and I'm committed, and at all costs, I will see this through, right? The problem is that the challenge for us as leaders is that a good employee experience doesn't mean that the organization perspective has been looked into, because it usually doesn't collaborate with the organization philosophy, right? So for example, somebody comes and says, hey, give me a size 9. You can't just say, you just can't just give a size 9. And then somebody comes and says, I want a size 7. You can't just, respond to say, okay, you asked for it, and my core function was to ensure that you have the right experience. So here we are, because it's not in line with the organization strategy and philosophy, right? But on the other hand, we also have a reverse experience, right? I call it a 10.2 experience, right? And what is 10.2, right? That's where you quote rules. So you actually go back to an individual and say, as per clause 10.2 in our policy on X, you're not eligible for this experience, and hence we as an organization are justified in the action that we've taken. And we always quote this 10.2 principle, bring out the clause and say, I'm sorry, but we are fair as an organization, and therefore I'm so sorry, we can't give you the right experience, right? And we pat ourselves on the back saying that, hey, you know what? I committed to the ethos of being fair. But the question is, did you commit to the ethos of employee experience, right? So how do you strike a balance, right? If you go overboard, you'll have organization disruption. And as a function, we need to be clear on what is that commit to employee experience. So how far are you willing to go to commit, right? I'll give you an example. And traditionally, when we look at staffing the function, we've always looked at people who have a HR background. And I know a company about 20 years ago actually said that this is about experience creation, and therefore we will go to the hospitality sector and hire people. We will not hire people. I mean, we'll have people with HR background, but we'll also have people who have a services background, who understand what experience is. People who've been trained to create those wow experiences, right? And, I think that team really made waves in terms of how they looked at employees and how they, shifted the lens of dealing with it. Because the first thing that these people brought in was just sheer patience, attitude in terms of talking to someone. And I think that blend, that diversity, went a long way in terms of managing the entire experience for people, right? So when we look at our team, are we starting fundamentally in terms of a structure and saying, maybe we'll invest in people who bring in maybe design thinking, because we want to launch in certain initiatives that would give us this particular value, right? And the other challenge that we have as a team is, how do you create touch, right? A design that works for 10K employees is not going to work for 100K, right? And often we're trapped in this because we know how to do it for 10K, but now how do you elevate it? And the organizations that really broke that mold and said, we're going to take some bold decisions, I think one of the things they carried with them is fearlessness, right? So if you look at some of the new age companies and the way they transformed employee experience, I mean, you wouldn't even think of something like work from home many years ago, right? But there were companies who said, no, we're going to break the mold. And I think the attribute we have that we can take away from them is really fearlessness, in terms of fearless, in terms of some of their policies and practices, right? And the challenge that we have when we look at, I would say, drafting out our employee experience program is that we have a tendency to lift and shift. But yesterday's solution is not going to work in today's context, and especially with the pandemic. And I'll, take an example. Earlier we did a FGD of 20 people, and we said, okay, now everybody's in the virtual space. So let's just look at putting everybody into the virtual space. I'll have a meeting, call 20 people, and we'll hear what they did. But now you see, it's not that simple, right? You have a large number of them logged in. They're possibly not even got their cameras on, right? They're possibly not listening to you. They're watching Netflix. And you have a tick mark saying, hey, I did my FGD, right? So the pandemic has created a new model. And I think one of the conscious things that we need to be careful of as a team, as we draft it, is, are we really taking yesterday's solutioning to today's problem, right? So some thoughts I wanted to leave with you, I'll just capture that again. The first is, how do you make that blend in terms of your commit to employee experience? And I would say that the maturity model of your employee experience is really in how do you make that blend. So you're at level one. Level one is where you just look at the person and say, hey, you know what? I'm not really bothered too much about the experience. You come, you work, there's a cost angle to this, and let's move on. And then, of course, there's level 2, level 3, and then level 4, which is really where you actually are more tilted towards the employee and what they think, right? Then we spoke about how do you create scale and touch, and how one of the attributes, the people who were the rainmakers was really fearless, being fearless, right? And the last one was, of course, about lifting and shifting and plugging and playing yesterday's solution into today's problem, right? And as we think about the entire scope of employee experience, I think it's important to know that maybe what we defined as experience earlier itself has changed, right? So maybe what the employees today are struggling with, right? Then maybe there's a transformation in that itself, right? Maybe the larger issue is not, am I engaged? Maybe the larger issue is, how do I be productive? I haven't seen my boss, I mean, my manager, how do I connect with him? I don't know how to manage my time. I've got my chores. I've got my kids going to school. So maybe the concept of those value points itself might have changed. And that's something that, we all need to look at, because the office model is not going to work in the hybrid model, right? And if we want to bring in that change, it's important for us to go back to the boardroom. We need to look at what works for whom, who wants what, and then redesign our policies and our experience journey so that we keep that in mind, right? So I'll possibly talk about a few success stories in the space of employee experience. So first I want to look at, let's say, a quantitative one, share with you. Now there was this company that I know of where they pulled in 6 months of help desk data. And then they came back and said that, let's do some analytics around it. And when they did the analytics around it, they found that 49% of the calls that came into the call center were from people who were new joinees, right? They were actually people who just joined, right? And then when they broke that down, they clustered it into 3 areas: clearly compensation, benefits, and what is their role. And what they found interesting is that the questions around benefits, for example, were more centered around what the policy didn't say, not what it said, right? So when we create a policy, we assume, okay, this is how it goes, and everybody will read it and understand. But there were a lot of questions that were getting raised in terms of what was not spoken about, right? Am I able to do this, right? And more than what it will cover, the questions around were what benefits it won't cover, right? So they built in certain FAQs, they built in artifacts around this, they created a salary calculator because there were a lot of questions on what is my next take home. And then they, brought that in. And of course, they were able to they saw a steep decline in, the tickets being raised. So there are a few principles that they looked at. There was data that they looked at. There was analytics. They deep dived into the case, the touch points, what people were going through. And then of course, they built in their strategies around that, right? So, for us in Mindtree, employee experience is a core part of our strategy. So coming back to that whole maturity model and how important it is, as part of our people strategy in Mindtree, we've actually called out to say that one size fits one. We don't have a conversation on one size fits all. The philosophy, the first bullet point is very clear: one size fits one. So whenever we're connecting with our teams, and in Mindtree, we call our people Mindtree Minds, we don't call them employees. We are constantly saying, how can one size fit one? How can I apply this one size fits one strategy, right? And that's when employee experience becomes personalized, and we're able to build on it, right? Another thing that we do in our organization, which I'm happy to share, is that when you look at research, you look at employee experience as as you ask people, what's the biggest challenge you have in employee experience? Research has shown that a lot of people come back to say, it's just inconsistent. I don't know what is my employee experience. So when you travel on a flight or you go to a hotel, you know what you would get. Like if it's a 5-star hotel, they're possibly going to add in a dental kit, or they're going to have a hair dryer or something, but 3-star or a 2-star may not have some of those perks. So it's very clearly defined. What can I expect in the experience? But when we carve out experiences, are we actually defining what could be an assured experience of the organization? So in Mindtree, we formatted what we call as an assured, employee Mindtree Minds experience. And so that kind of gives or takes away the grayness of what can I expect if I join Mindtree. So everybody is clear that, these are, and it's not about what have you called out, it's about have you called out, right? So we call out 10, 15 things that we know for sure that every Mindtree mind will have as an experience, right? And what we've also done is built in KPIs around that, so we're able to track outcome. Now, units still have customized programs that they run, but at the end of the day, it is about ensuring that no matter what, that assured experience, which is our commit to the Mindtree mind, is taken care of. And that drive is from the function, from the business units, etc. Right? And I can go on. I'm happy to share more inputs in terms of what we do, but I also see it's 4:25 p.m. So I just kind of wrap up. I'm happy to take some questions, right? I think as I close, the input to all of us is, when you try to carve out experience, you will find yourself in an advantageous position, because unlike earlier where we all had the option to, we had to go to the drawing board, we had to script, then we had to give it to technology team to enable. And by the time they enabled it and it got executed, your strategy changed, right? But today, the thing is, we're in the age of Swiggy and Zomato when it comes to tools and, point solutions, accelerators in terms of managing employee experience. So we're able to go and say, I want it now, instantly delivered, consumable packaging. And that's a huge up in terms of timeline and getting it running. So if you want to run something next month, you are able to do that. And, there's a plethora of tools and technology available to do it, right? So as I close, when you think through experience and carving out a success story for your organization, remember that it's unique. You can't stand outside and carve out what that success story in your organization is. It's going to be based on your commit, your level of maturity, and your willingness to take the organization on in terms of that ethos of what does the employee experience stand for you. Then, of course, it's about doing that blueprinting, finding out what are those value points, creating an ecosystem where the entire organization is harnessed towards the assured framework that you have created. And then, of course, there are tools and technologies to make the experience wow for you. So I'll pause there, and I do hope that as all of us navigate this journey, that, we are going to quickly ride this S-curve of ambiguity that we are all dealing with in the WFX. And before we know it, I'm quite sure all of us are going to be riding that wave. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so very much, Shalini, for sharing those thoughts. Multiple takeaways for me personally. And I specifically would like to quote what you touched upon. Are we really going back to the drawing board and trying to answer for ourselves if we are still stuck in yesterday's solutions for today's problems or possibly futuristic problems? And also the aspect of bringing in consistency in experience, that really struck a chord. Each organization's reality is different. So carving out one size fits one approach, extremely inspirational, aspirational as well. But for organizations to start off from the point where they define their own realities, they define their own framework, and then tell that, yes, level 3 is what resonates with me, at this juncture, or level 4 is what resonates with me, is extremely powerful, that you mentioned. And of course, so many other takeaways as well. A few questions also that many of us have a few questions from the audience already coming in, but we will take that up in our fireside chat conversation, which is coming up next, for which I will like to also invite Smriti from Advantage Club, along with Charlie. So I do have a few set of questions, that I'd like to hear your thoughts on. So trying to keep this as conversational, so please feel free to jump in with your views. My first question, Shalini, I'm going to come back to you again, and I want to understand that while you spoke about one size fits all approach is no longer something that seems to be working for many organizations, and wherein you have taken a different take on that, and you are actually creating an extremely personalized experience for each each Mindtree mind, as you so beautifully call it. So with so many, opportunities available for the candidates, they are clearly in a buyer's market, and especially in your industry, right? And we keep hearing about, people having 3 or 4 job offers before they actually go in and, join a particular organization. So in this kind of a scenario, how can organizations showcase an impactful EVP to attract talent, specifically if I have to talk about attracting talent?
I'm so sorry on that. I was trying to figure
Not at all. In case you're bothered about your lighting, I think it's perfect. So
Okay.
it's been good all along. So yeah, don't worry about that.
I'm sorry, it looked a little dark and I was wondering. I'm so sorry on that, right? No, thanks for that, Nitya. And I think the input. See, I think when you talk about EVP, right, we are very obsessed with the fact that okay, if this is my EVP, then that's going to sell. But irrespective of what EVP you have, right, what actually ends up attracting or retaining talent is talent itself, right? It is the employee. So if you want to attract talent, you take care of your current employees, right? And give them the right experience. They will talk about you in the market, right? Now, the thing, so then you put in frameworks to make that employee feel good. And, so for example, I would take for, if you take campus hires, right? Why do we treat our campus kids with kid glove? They get this fantastic salary that other people in the company don't get, is because we know that their experience and feedback is what's going to drive the next batch to apply. Because if they've had a great time, the next batch is also going to come. So we're going out of our way, and they have, compensation and perks that are out of the ordinary, right? And the important thing is, when you look at strategy, it's not about the ROI on that particular transaction, right? It's about building a long-term strategy that year on year, we will get premium talent from the campus, and they will walk into our company, right? So the biggest brand, or the biggest, when you have people with multiple opportunities, the biggest focus is really the current person in your organization, right? If you have a vibrant culture, if your employees feeling valued, if you have technology that this generation can relate to, irrespective of how you packaged, it boils down to how did the individual feel. And one of the great measures of this, I would say, is really our referral program, right? How many of your employees are going to their friends and saying, what a wonderful place Mindtree is to work. This is a great place. I love their ethos. I love this place. Come join me and come join us, right? And we've also seen, of course, people sharing their examples on social media, right? About how they felt valued. Hey, I got recognized today. I have grown my career. I'm grateful to the organization for giving me the space. And I think as we talk about EVP, I'm sure each organization has it, but I do want to, say that don't forget the biggest brand ambassador, which is the employee.
So well said. I do recollect, there used to be times when organizations hardly used to spend the money on marketing. Word of mouth used to do all the talking for them. Of course, in this day and age, especially of social media, we can hardly do that. But so rightly said that, we can definitely make this work if only we really understand who our key stakeholders are and take care of them well. I think the rest would just play out in itself. Smriti, I'm going to jump to you with my next question. Now, you're someone who works closely with many organizations, right? And you know the kind of changes that the organizations have gone through in the last few years, and how we are exploring consistently how things are changing, the way we work, the way we envisage future of work. So given this current dynamic environment, how should organizations calibrate their productivity and performance yardsticks? Do you think it's very easy to say that we are going to personalize an approach, but I'm sure there's a lot that goes behind actually designing and ensuring there is fairness while we are designing those yardsticks. So what are your thoughts around this?
Yeah. Thanks, Nitya. And first of all, thank you so much, Shalini, for such an interesting, keynote. I knew a few things about Mindtree earlier, but I think it was so nice to hear about so many interesting other things which your company does as well. So coming to your question, Nitya, around calibrating performance yardsticks, I think I would divide it in 5 particular ways. One is to obviously encourage learning opportunities for everybody, because at the end of the day, your performance is directly linked to the amount of learning which employees have been able to achieve. And the more learning programs, the more L&D is encouraged or improved within every organization, the better it becomes in terms of the overall performance as well. Second is primarily around deploying of technology to make implementation of those policies and all your employee experiential programs better for everyone. Like you mentioned today, with the hybrid workforce setup, it is especially more crucial for organizations to deploy more and more technology-based tools to make employee lives better and more productive. Because when you talk about personalization, if you're doing it without the help of technology, you can only go so far. But when you have digital programs in which, irrespective of whether you're at home or you're at work, or whether you're hybrid or traveling or in a cab, you always have access to those tools and those communication platforms through which you can make your productivity go much higher. And in terms of fairness, also, I feel that the third piece, which is around emphasizing company culture, comes into play, where everything you do or every performance yardstick which you have needs to be deployed with your cultural values. All your core values of the organization need to be inculcated in all your programs. It kind of also gives an right kind of an idea to employee that what are you supposed to do and what are you not supposed to do to actually drive a better culture within the company. As a company, you also have a wonderful community, right? So you're a community of people who probably spend half of your lifetime together at the workplace. You can also take benefit of that community. You can benefit greatly from each other. You can share experiences with one another. You can partake in activities even beyond work together as well, and much more. Like, for example, in Advantage Club, we have like built a community tool as well, where you can partake in like hobby clubs, you can interact with people with similar interests, you can participate in like internal OLX style classifieds, there's internal gaming programs, a lot of things where, you know, you can leverage the community together and ensure that people are able to work beyond colleagues with each other as well. The whole personalized experience piece is also really important. Like Shalini also touched upon very nicely on those points, that the whole experience for the employee needs to be personalized. If you are actually, say, recognizing somebody, then there needs to be a proper citation around why you're doing it, what core value or what cultural value has been implemented, because of which that particular recognition is being given. Which brings me to my fourth pointer, which is around strengthening communication protocols. So when I say communication, it goes both ways, right? So if you inculcate a culture of feedback, it needs to also go from the employees to the leaderships. In fact, leadership should make maybe feedback like a cultural value in the organization. Feedback is not just like an HR's job. It needs to be called out clearly. It needs to be implemented across the entire leadership, and everyone needs to take the onus of that particular implementation of the culture itself. Lastly, the fifth point, and I think one of the most important point, is to align your goals with performance themselves. Like I mentioned earlier, if you're recognizing somebody, there needs to be a complete transparency around, or like a strong SOP around why you are recognizing them, what did they do right, because of which they're actually getting recognized on good performance. And what exactly do you mean by good performance, and how transparent can you become around the same defines the success or failure of productivity. Now, not only that, it also gives employees the right motivation and the right understanding of what needs to be done, what needs to be achieved to actually be called a performer and get aligned to the right set of goals. So I think these are the 5 things which organizations typically look at while they are defining their performance yardsticks.
Thank you, Smriti. I think very clearly, transparency is one thing that this generation really values, and when they are really picking out an organization, they are also delving deeper into what are the larger values that an organization is ascribing itself to. Does that value, does that value system align to what I'm personally seeking for myself, are some of the key questions that they're asking themselves and the organizations as well. So anything that helps create value in terms of building in that transparency, building in that level of fairness, that yes, if I do invest in myself, if I do put in the hard work, then things are going to come my way, is becoming increasingly important. And technology has very beautifully paved way to do that in organizations at scale. So thank you so much for sharing that, Smriti. I'll move to my next question. And Smriti, you also touched upon the organizational cultural aspect of it and how it has a big impact on talent attraction, retention, etc. So Shalini, let me come to you to understand that we are largely in a hybrid work environment, more so for ITITs. Every other day we read in newspapers that TCS has declared that for the next 3 years they're going to just work from home, and so are different other organizations, so on and so forth. One, of course, you also in your presentation mentioned that many of them have not even met their immediate bosses. Many of them have not met their colleagues. How difficult or easy is it to really build an organizational culture in such an environment? And this is going to be the future, right? So this is one of the asks of many employees, to have this flexibility of work from anywhere. So how does this entire piece of organizational culture play, and what are some of the challenges for the organizations? How are you tackling it?
Yeah, no, I think one of the first things, at least we are certainly doing in Mindtree, is earlier it was talent coming to us. Okay, now we're very clear we're going to talent, right? And I don't think we're the only one doing it, right? People have actually now said, all of the companies that I know are actually looking at tier 2 strategy, tier 3 strategy. There is a hub and spoke model, that's kind of developed, right? So very clearly, you are now changing the lens to say that talent need not necessarily come to you. Will you go to talent? So one of the strategies we have in our ethos is, of course, can we go to, talent, right? The second thing is in terms of, let's say, the office space, right? Many people don't have cabins and seats anymore. The concept has gone, right? So earlier there was pride. I have my cabin, I have my seat, and now you don't have that anymore. So you actually walk in, you have to learn to book a room for your meetings, and HR finds it even more difficult because some of our meetings are confidential, right? But I don't think that luxury exists anymore. And I think what's happening with the even ODCs, right, which have very strict rules that you can't enter if you are not from the ODC, etc. Now realize that, listen, one place is not going to be a reality anymore, right? And so then that means you've got to build in infrastructure. Earlier, if I went to a different office in my same location, it could have been in the same location, or if I went to Mumbai, I can't log into the system because the IT app won't allow you to, saying that you're not from here, you can't log into this office. So a lot of changes around some of this, and everything really built around the fact that people are not going to be based in one location. And even if you look at policies, like earlier we had a relocation policy, right? We said, if you relocate, I will pay for your travel, I will pay for your transport, I will give you 2 weeks accommodation, and your goods movement has, maybe some of them it's not going to be reality anymore because people are working in, fluid workspaces. So I think, these are some changes that would happen. And mostly, I don't think 5-day work is a reality, work week, right? And it's not about whether you're working Monday to Friday. It's about the fact that we're not working on a time concept anymore. We are very clearly moving into an impact related concept. So to say that no, 5-day week, this is how it will go, this is how your structure will be, that's not going to be a reality anymore. So just some thoughts.
Yeah, thank you, Shalini. So what I clearly hear you say is that as long as there is alignment of minds, the values, the asks that a candidate has from an organization, and vice versa, I think we are good to go. I mean, we will, as we go along, define those cultures and keeping employees, keeping people at the center of everything would then define the culture of an organization than organizations defining culture and people aligning to it. Thank you, Shalini, for your thoughts. Smriti, I'm going to come to you to try and understand that, workplaces are definitely evolving. What do you see as future of workplaces, or how we workplace? How do you see that evolving?
So I think we've already had a little bit of flavor around how the future of workplaces is going to be, in which we have your hybrid setup, you have your work from home, you have your work from anywhere. I remember, I think, even before the pandemic, I think Bangalore had also started something around work from cab, in which, there's so much traffic that people would start working like 2 hours earlier from their
So
cab.
practical. So you're making the most.
Yeah, I remember Ola Uber that time were giving, I think, free Wi-Fi and all of that. So I think some of us already had a flavor of that, and a lot of us were forced to kind of adapt to a digital program or a digital mechanism of working overnight. And now you're actually seeing a reverse psychology, in which people are so comfortable working from anywhere that it's harder for them to come back to a setup in which now they have to like specifically work from office. I've seen most of the organizations adapt to more flexi office hours, that you can come say 3 days a week or 4 days a week. There's also this talk going around, can we move to say a 4-day week instead of a 5-day week? So a lot, I think, will change in the future as well, and from the current setup, which has already changed so much, I think a lot is going to change in the future as well. I also feel from like a future workplace perspective, gig economy is also something which is becoming a reality as we speak. More and more companies are also more comfortable. Like I was talking to one of the CHRs in one of the largest media firms in the country, and they were saying that we've started investing so much in gig economy now that we have like a certain large percentage of people who have moved from like, and voluntarily moved from, because they're all content writers and they can do that, so voluntarily moved from a full-time setup to a half salary gig economy setup, and they're open to take as many jobs as they want, as long as the work is being done. So I think that is also something which we'll see more being implemented in the future. Most technology platforms are also adapting to the fact that I think people are going to be more hybrid and more gig based in the future. And they might be an influencer, they might be a content writer, they might be somebody else, and they might be doing 3 jobs at the same time. And compensation wise, of course, they will be adjusted accordingly. Benefit wise, it's still, I think, is yet to be seen that what happens. Do they get the same benefits as your full times as what we get to contracts? But I think these are the things we might see more happening in the future, according to me.
Thank you, Smriti. Very interesting, right? I mean, I also heard someone recently mention that they go to office to collaborate, and they work from homes to be productive. So we are redefining all of these terms and aspects. All right. In the interest of time, and I do have quite a few questions from the audience as well. So let's try and cover as much as possible. So Anirudh here wants to know that how important is employee delight, and how does it impact experience? Also, how do you measure experience? Would you invest without seeing ROI? I mean, the question is open. It'll be great if each of you can share your thoughts. So I'll start off with Shalini.
Yeah, how important is it? It's very important. And it goes back to that ethos that we spoke about in terms of the maturity model. If you're at level 1, then it isn't important, because you're only seeing the individual as a resource. But if you are committed to walk the talk on employee experience, like the hospitality industry is, where everybody is committed to that experience, then it's extremely high. And if you believe that your employee is your brand champion in to attract and retain talent, then yes, it's very important. So one of the things we did in Mindtree is we had our there are so many people who've been there for more than 10 years, right? We actually have them come across and talk about their stories. How did they actually grow? And I was just to tell a lot of people today who've come in that it's not about coming in and leaving within 6 months and 12 months. This is a place you can make your career. This is how people move from being, at level 1 to a head of a business or a head of an account. And those stories resonated loudly. So, I don't know if that answered. So in terms of being important, it's very important. Yes, it's important to measure ROI, because if you don't measure, you don't know what impact you've really created. Now, ROI doesn't have to be statistical. It could always be qualitative. So there are huge sentiment maps that you can get. So when you've done something, are you able to capture that experience and give it an avatar? The avatar could be a survey where it says, somebody says, on this particular point, I got 4 on 5. I would rate Mindtree 4 on 5. It could be just an emotion to say that, I just feel that when it comes to feeling valued at Mindtree, these are the words that come to my mind. And then you start realizing that there are strong patterns that your experience has created in the minds of people.
Super. Thank you, Shalini, for that. Any top of the mind thoughts, Smriti?
Yeah, I think the importance, I couldn't explain it better than Shalini, but I think in terms of ROI, I just like to add a few things that, like Shalini mentioned, I think analytics lies at the core of any successful program. So one of the things which we typically do is, which we've seen work, is that you can identify attrition and retention parameters across your programs themselves. Like, for example, if you have say launched a program with a certain set of users. Now, not all the users are going to actually, partake in that program. Now, the percentage of users who are actually taking part in the program versus the percentage of users who are not taking part in it, what is the percentage difference between both of them? If we are able to see a significant improvement in this set of people, then that means that particular program has really, really worked for your organizations. And similarly for surveys, I think, like Shalini mentioned, that it is important to understand the pulse of the organization. And I feel that you should do it in a very constant fashion, like maybe not annually. You could try doing it quarterly or every 6 monthly in nature, because if you try to do everything annually, by the time you're actually reaching the survey, I think the dissatisfied employees have already tried it. So keeping it fresh and doing it on a regular basis also, I feel, is important.
Thank you, Smriti, for that. There's another question, interesting one from Asher, who asked that in the current scenario of great resignation, what are some of the best practices to create more enriching or satisfying employee experience, especially for new recruits? So we did touch upon this during our discussion in terms of, having great referral programs, that can be a great testimony in itself. But anything specific for the new recruits, Shalini?
Yeah, no, I think the challenge new recruits have today is that technology is going faster than their learning curve, right? Mm-hmm. So when you joined 10 years ago, you needed to know a Java or a .NET, right? Now there's a Java and there's a flavor of that and there's another flavor of that and there's a third flavor of it, and it is an overwhelming experience, right? So one of the good things that maybe a lot of organizations, including Mindtree, have adopted is that we have a self-learning platform, right? So the platform is there. You have groups where you can, of course, connect with like-minded things. If you want to do your certification, there are people who've done it before. You have those groups you can connect with. And the platform itself is hugely intuitive in terms of helping you choose and, choose that. So you don't need to be in a project to start learning. Learning is a constant journey. And therefore, I don't want to take too long, but definitely that's helped us a lot in our organization in terms of helping people transition and, feel that from the day they join, Mindtree is a place where you can learn and where you can grow.
Thank you, Shalini. Smriti, any inputs here? Any thoughts that you'd like to share?
I just want to add one point here, like, when you're looking at new recruits, I feel that there is also a sense of personalization from your managers or your leads, which needs to be inculcated, especially when they join, right? Because let's face it, most people leave their managers and not their companies. So typically empowering the management to actually empower the employee becomes important. So the entire experience from your first day of joining to probably your first week or your first month becomes extremely crucial. And that's why, like Shalini mentioned, that when we typically hire from colleges, we make their joining week so elaborate in nature that they go and talk to their friends about it, their other colleagues about it. So I think communication from your management's perspective needs to be, I think, doubled up during the first month of somebody joining in. And of course, once a person is settled in and they're comfortable, that can be reduced over time. But I think the training process and the joining process needs to be absolutely seamless from your management.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Smriti. The next question I'm going to direct to you, Smriti, because you did make a mention of this when we were discussing. Nidhi wants to know that how to maintain the sanity of internal community clubs, as this can be one big challenge. So yes, would you like to share some thoughts?
So for community clubs, I think one of the things which we do is we have created a moderation process. So typically, if you have created a club, you should ideally assign, just like on Facebook, right? You have moderators to the club. So ideally, you should assign maybe 2 or 3 people from your company who are very passionate about that community. Ideally, are in a senior leadership position. What it also does is not only does it maintain the sanity, it also encourages people to join the club. Imagine my leader is inviting me to join a photography club. I mean, dare I say no if I love photography, right? It also gives me an idea that I never knew that this person actually says more professional as a photographer, or that's something I never knew about that person. So it also creates a sense of belongingness towards the community I am part of. And I also feel that, creating communities also creates a culture in which you add an additional barrier to attrition. So you are not just leaving the company, you're leaving this great community of people who you are, talking to, enjoying with, and hanging out with digitally or physically day in and day out. So moderation is one really good way. Second, in terms of giving accessibility to people who are in senior leadership positions to also ensure that nothing bad is posted on the community. So giving them edit or delete rights as well. And lastly, what we also do for communities is typically, again, sanity is one piece, engagement is another. So to drive engagement, there should be like calendars, there should be events where, you're constantly running different contests. So you're constantly running different engagement activities where people can partake. Otherwise, 3 days, 4 days, people will post pictures of their pets and then nobody will post it and anything ever again. So maintaining that constant engagement also is important to maintain the utilization of that community.
Thank you, Smriti. I think using technology well to automate some of these processes and to make it very, very easy for the end user to do that will kind of help build momentum and sustainability of such initiatives, the way I hear it. All right, this question, Shalini, I'll request you to take up, where Parul wants to know that please share some best practices to build a positive work experience.
Sure. So I think I already spoke about some of it that Mindtree does, but maybe another one I could share, which is at leadership level, right? Because very often our engagement and experience is about people in the entry level groups. So what we created is we created a shared service of executive assistance for leadership. And typically what happens is you don't have somebody supporting you in your day-to-day tasks. Or rather, if you do, you have to be a president or, a senior vice president to be able to do that. But the reality is a lot of the business heads and a lot of people at that level are doing multiple transactions, with the client, with delivery, escalations, etc. And the last thing you really want them to get bogged down is with the ticketing and booking a hotel and booking a travel. And it's a huge part of their day-to-day journey, right? So what we created is we have a shared services model that we run, where everybody in a particular, at a particular level just gets this by default. And so it's a huge positive experience just to know that when you're going, the cab is at your gate and you didn't have to worry about it, right? I mean, it's small things. But the thing is, when we looked at productivity, when we looked at experience, when we looked at places that were angst, one of the biggest angst that came was, oh, I've got to submit that bill. Oh my goodness, I haven't done my accounts. And leaders were actually willing to give up money because the time consumingness of going to these portals and closing it. So it's just an example that I could talk of.
Yeah, but that sounds so familiar and so relatable. I can think of so many times that many of us would have let go of that just because, we don't want to do that one additional task of, doing the bills, etc. But here's again another way of, coming together, collaborating, using your shared resources to make it work for yourself and the teams and the organization at large. All right. So in the interest of time, I'm going to very quickly summarize some very interesting thoughts that we heard on employee experience and how this is going to really redefine the future of work. Very clearly, what we've heard in the last 1 hour is that employees and the other people that you're designing this entire experience for. So everything has to be centered around them and what ticks for them. And each of us to our own, we have different requirements, and that's where futuristic organizations will actually be designing, solutions around one size fits one. So extremely personalized way of looking at things is the way we see it. And great enabler in this space is going to be technology, because we're talking about different ways of working, different styles of working, different requirements from the work. So technology is going to be a great leveler of sorts to help us ensure that there is transparency, there is there is fairness in everything that an organization stands for. Again, I think it is in each of our own interest and benefit to ensure that this kind of a setup works. While organization can be an enabler, technology can be an enabler, I think we as the employees, as the minds of organizations should actually take the onus of our growth in our own hands and seek out for support. I'm sure organizations are more than willing to extend that support to us. So on that note, thank you so very much, Shalini and Smriti. That was a wonderful session. And thank you very much, audience. Some very interesting questions that came our way. I hope you got your answers to those. On that note, thank you so very much. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.